A buttoned-up CEO is pushed into a single, harmless PR night and walks out having fallen in love the moment he meets her. It's not a fling. It's sudden, deep, and the kind of feeling that melts a man who never let anyone in. Months later, she shows him a tiny, positive test, and everything explodes. Private vows, boardroom secrets, and a betrayer who leaks their story to the press. He's never been intimate. She's already carrying a life they didn't plan. Can a man who built his life on rules become the father and partner she needs before the world and his past tear them apart? The first rays of dawn had barely touched the gleaming skyscrapers when Ethan Caldwell stepped into his boardroom. At 6:30 in the morning, the city below was still waking up, but Ethan moved through his morning ritual with practiced precision. The glass walls of his office reflected his tall figure as he poured steaming black coffee into his favorite navy blue mug, the rich aroma filling the quiet space around him. He paused to gaze at the city awakening below, delivery trucks moving along streets, early commuters hurrying to beat the rush, lights flickering on in neighboring buildings. The stack of reports on his desk stood perfectly aligned, each corner matching the next with mathematical exactness. His fingers straightened an already straight pile, a habit born of his need for order. But it was the small wooden box beside them that drew his attention, its polished surface warm against the cool modernity of his desk. His fingers traced the smooth edges before carefully lifting the lid, the hinges making a soft creak that seemed loud in the morning stillness. Inside lay a single piece of paper, yellowed with age, the corners slightly frayed, containing words he'd written long ago in careful, determined handwriting. Ethan closed his eyes, and the memories washed over him like a sudden rain. He was 17 again, standing beneath a dark umbrella at his parents' funeral, raindrops mingling with tears he refused to acknowledge. The weight of unexpected responsibility had settled on his narrow shoulders that day. The loss had carved something deep inside him, a hollow space that he'd filled with a solemn promise. On that wrinkled paper, he'd pledged to live a life of purpose, to help others, to never let emotion cloud his judgment. That promise had shaped every decision since, guiding his education, his career choices, turning him into the controlled, disciplined man who now ran one of the city's largest charitable foundations. He ran his finger over the faded ink, feeling the indentations his younger self had pressed into the paper. Through college, through business school, through the early struggles of building the foundation, the promise had anchored him when uncertainty loomed. Carefully he placed the lid back on the box, a morning ritual that reminded him why each day mattered. The quiet morning peace shattered at 9 o'clock, when Miles Hart burst through the door, bringing with him the energy of a small hurricane. His tie was slightly crooked, his jacket unbuttoned, and a grin spread across his face like sunshine after a storm. "Morning, boss. Ready for some exciting news?" he announced, his voice filling every corner of the previously silent room. Ethan carefully closed the wooden box, sliding it to its designated position. "Miles, I have 3 board meetings today," he replied, his tone measured and calm, the perfect counterbalance to his friend's exuberance. "Perfect timing, then." Miles dropped into a chair opposite Ethan, propping his feet on Ethan's pristine desk and leaving a small smudge that made Ethan's jaw tighten imperceptibly. "Because tonight, you're going to the Downtown Family Center fundraiser. The Caldwell Foundation is their biggest donor this year, and they're expecting the man himself to show up. About time you got out from behind this fortress of solitude." "I wasn't aware we had committed to attending," Ethan said, his voice level but with an edge of wariness. He reached for his calendar, flipping through it methodically. "There's nothing scheduled." "Oh, come on. The board's expecting you there. It's just a small event. Nice people, good cause, decent appetizers if we're lucky." Miles wiggled his eyebrows conspiratorially, leaning forward. Plus, their new coordinator is fantastic. Smart, dedicated, passion for community work. Exactly the kind of person you should meet. For purely professional reasons, of course. His grin suggested nothing purely professional about his intentions. Before Ethan could respond with what would certainly have been a firm refusal, Clara Nguyen entered the room, tablet in hand, her steps quiet and purposeful. Her presence brought a steadying energy to the charged atmosphere, like a gentle hand calming rough waters. "He's right, Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but firm as she took her usual seat to Ethan's left. "The board has been asking about your personal involvement in our community projects, especially Donovan. He mentioned it twice in yesterday's finance meeting." "I'm involved," Ethan protested quietly, straightening a pen on his desk. "I review every proposal, approve every budget." "From behind your desk," Clara finished, her dark eyes meeting his with a kindness that softened the truth in her words. "The Downtown Family Center is becoming our flagship project. Your appearance tonight would show genuine commitment to the cause. The families and volunteers need to see the face behind the foundation name." Miles nodded enthusiastically, swinging his feet down from the desk. "Just a quick meet and greet. 2 hours tops. I'll be there the whole time to run interference if anyone gets too chatty. Clara can coordinate everything to keep it low-key." He glanced at Clara with appreciation for her tactical support. Ethan's fingers drummed once on his desk, his only visible sign of internal conflict. The prospect of an evening of small talk with strangers made his shoulders tense, but he recognized the practical wisdom in their advice. Clara leaned forward, her dark eyes kind but determined. 2 hours maximum. No speeches. Just show up, shake a few hands, meet the coordinator. The board will be pleased, and the center gets the attention it deserves. I've already confirmed your schedule is clear tonight. The morning sun now filled the office completely, streaming through the eastern windows, making the glass walls sparkle with golden light that cast long shadows across the carpeted floor. Ethan looked at his two most trusted advisors, Miles with his eager enthusiasm and boundless energy, and Clara with her practical wisdom and quiet strength. Then his gaze fell to the wooden box containing his old promise, helping others, making a difference. Perhaps some promises needed to be kept in new ways, beyond spreadsheets and budgets and boardroom decisions. Reaching for his phone, Ethan typed out a quick message, his thumbs moving with the same precision he applied to everything. "Fine. One night." He set the phone down with finality. Miles jumped up with a whoop of victory that echoed off the glass walls, while Clara simply smiled and made a note on her tablet, already mentally arranging the logistics. The Downtown Family Center fundraiser would take place that very evening, and Ethan Caldwell would be there, stepping outside his carefully constructed comfort zone, whether he was ready or not. The Downtown Family Center glowed like a beacon in the early evening darkness. At 7 o'clock, warm yellow light spilled from its windows onto the sidewalk, inviting visitors inside. Children's artwork decorated the walls, bright crayon drawings of families holding hands, construction paper flowers, and carefully lettered poems about home. Handprints in rainbow colors formed a border along the hallway, each one labeled with a child's name and age in wobbly lettering. The scent of fresh-baked cookies mingled with the faint smell of cleaning supplies and art materials, creating that distinctive aroma that belonged only to places where children gathered. Maya Rivera moved through the space with quiet purpose, adjusting a plate of chocolate chip cookies on the refreshment table and straightening a stack of pamphlets. Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, and she paused to help a young volunteer arrange chairs. This wasn't just another fundraiser to her. It was home. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, her eyes scanning the room for anything out of place, any detail that needed attention before their important visitors arrived. "How's the lemonade supply holding up, Danny?" she asked the teenage volunteer who'd been with the center for 3 summers now. Just made another picture, Ms. Rivera, Danny replied with a proud smile, gesturing toward the drink table. The center hummed with life. Local residents chatted near a display of community photos, while volunteers in blue t-shirts weaved between guests carrying trays of lemonade. A woman with a laptop and press badge sat in the corner, typing notes for her blog, while a reporter from the city newspaper snapped photos with his phone. Children darted between adult legs, giggling and occasionally stopping to grab a cookie when they thought no one was looking. The worn couches in the corner were filled with elderly neighbors who came as much for the company as for the event itself. When Ethan Caldwell entered with Clara at his side, Maya noticed how his crisp suit and careful posture seemed almost too foreign for the cheerful chaos around him. He looked like a man who had stepped into a foreign country without a map. His dark tie was perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine that seemed almost at odds with the center's scuffed linoleum floors. "Mr. Caldwell," Maya said, extending her hand at the registration table. "Welcome to our little piece of the neighborhood." Her smile was genuine, though slightly reserved, the expression of someone who had learned to be cautious with powerful visitors bearing promises. His handshake was firm but brief. "Ms. Rivera, thank you for hosting us tonight." His voice carried that particular timbre of someone accustomed to boardrooms rather than community spaces. "Maya, please." She picked up a visitor's badge and handed it to him. "We're pretty informal here." She gestured toward the handwritten name tag, a simple design decorated with tiny hand-drawn stars in the corners. Clara stepped back discreetly, leaving them to talk. Her observant eyes took in the room, noting the worn furniture that had been carefully cleaned, the donated books arranged with loving care on makeshift shelves. The community blogger drifted closer, but maintained a respectful distance, her notebook poised to capture whatever might unfold. "Tell me," Maya said, gesturing to the bustling room, "what do you see when you look at our center?" Her question was gentle but direct, a subtle test of his perception. Ethan's response was measured, executive precise. "I see potential. The Foundation believes with proper funding and oversight." "Oversight." Maya's eyes sparkled with gentle challenge. "Mr. Caldwell, these families don't need oversight. They need support without strings attached." She tilted her head slightly, studying his reaction. "They need people who believe in them, not just in spreadsheets and outcome reports." A slight furrow appeared between his eyebrows. "The board has certain requirements." "Come with me," Maya interrupted, starting down the hallway. "I want to show you something beyond what your reports can measure." They walked past rooms filled with after-school activities and parent support groups. Maya pointed out the computer lab, where residents could search for jobs, and the tiny library stocked with donated books. Children waved at Maya as they passed, their faces lighting up with recognition and trust. "Mrs. Chen there," Maya said quietly, nodding toward an elderly woman helping a child with homework. "Comes every Tuesday and Thursday, even though her arthritis makes it hard to climb our front steps. And that man by the bulletin board, he was homeless last year. Now he teaches our computer skills workshop. This is our gratitude wall," she said, stopping at a large bulletin board covered in colorful notes. "Every message here is from someone whose life changed because of this place." The wall was a patchwork of different handwriting styles, some elegant, others childish scrawls, a few barely legible, but all heartfelt. Ethan stepped closer, reading. One note in elegant cursive caught his eye. "Thank you for giving Tommy a safe place to do his homework while I work late. June Carter." "June volunteers here now," Maya explained softly. "She teaches reading twice a week." Her voice carried a warmth that spoke of genuine connection rather than professional networking. "How many children?" Ethan's voice trailed off, his usual composure cracking slightly as he took in the scope of what was happening in this modest building. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How many children come here after school?" June Carter herself appeared beside them, her grey hair neatly pinned back, eyes crinkled at the corners from decades of smiles. 37 at last count, she answered with a warm smile. Each one precious, each one with dreams bigger than the challenges they face. Her weathered hands smoothed down her simple cardigan as she extended one toward Ethan. "You must be Mr. Caldwell. I've heard we might have you to thank for keeping our lights on next year." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight release of tension in his shoulders. "And they all need a safe place?" The question came out more vulnerable than he'd intended, as though he were asking about more than just the children. "They need what we all need, Mr. Caldwell," June replied. "A little hope and a lot of love, maybe especially those of us who've forgotten how to ask for either." Her gentle words carried no judgment, only wisdom. The official part of the evening wound down, but Maya found Ethan lingering in the kitchen as volunteers cleaned up. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting everyone in a slightly harsh glow that somehow made the scene more authentic. She poured 2 cups of coffee into mismatched mugs, one advertising a local hardware store, the other featuring faded cartoon characters, and sat across from him at the small table with its surface worn smooth by years of elbows and conversations. "Sugar?" she offered, pushing a chipped bowl his way. "Black is fine." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "This place, it's different than I expected." His voice had lost some of its boardroom polish, revealing something more genuine underneath. "Different good or different bad?" Maya's question was direct, but her eyes were kind. "Good," he said quietly. "Very good." He glanced around at the worn cabinets, the refrigerator covered in children's artwork, the hand-lettered cleaning schedule. "There's something here that spreadsheets don't capture." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of closing up activities drifting in from the main room. Someone laughed in the hallway, and the back door opened and closed as volunteers carried trash bags outside. "I'd like to bring the Foundation's check personally next week," Ethan said finally. "Perhaps we could discuss your plans for the computer lab upgrade." His tone suggested this might be more than a perfunctory follow-up. Maya nodded. "Wednesday morning? There's a cafe around the corner, the Daily Grind. We can talk there." She hesitated, then added, "It has terrible coffee, but the best cinnamon rolls in the city. Worth the trade-off." 10 o'clock? Perfect. Ethan stood to leave, straightening his jacket with a habitual gesture that seemed slightly unnecessary now, as if his usual armor had begun to feel too rigid. He paused at the kitchen door, looking back at the warm space with its mismatched mugs and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Something tugged at his chest, unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, yet not entirely unwelcome. The feeling reminded him of muscles long unused suddenly being asked to work again. As he walked to his car, the center's windows still glowed behind him, and the evening's conversations echoed in his mind. It was more than the building or the programs that had affected him. It was the feeling of the place, the genuine warmth, the simple dignity, the quiet way it held its occupants like family. Like something he'd forgotten existed, or perhaps had never known. In the distance, Clara waited patiently by the car, her silhouette familiar and reassuring against the darkening sky. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan felt slightly changed by the hours that had passed between arriving and leaving a place. The fluorescent lights of Caldwell Tower buzzed overhead as Ethan moved through his week. Board meetings filled his mornings, while afternoons stretched into evening conference calls with investors across time zones. His calendar was packed with the usual rhythms of corporate life: signing documents, reviewing quarterly projections, and fielding endless emails. The familiar weight of responsibility settled across his shoulders as he navigated from one obligation to the next, his Mont Blanc pen moving efficiently across documents that would impact hundreds of employees. But between these familiar tasks, his mind kept drifting to the warmth of the family center and a pair of kind eyes that had seen past his careful exterior. The memory would come at odd moments, during a budget meeting or while waiting for his car, and he'd find himself wondering what Maya was doing right then. Clara had noticed his distraction, offering him a knowing smile when he'd asked her to find a local cafe for his meeting with Maya. Something casual, he'd specified, nowhere that screamed corporate power lunch. She'd nodded and handed him the address without comment, but her eyes held a gentle approval that made him feel both seen and slightly uncomfortable. The Bell Street Cafe was nothing like his usual sleek downtown haunts. Mismatched chairs clustered around wooden tables worn smooth by years of elbows and coffee cups. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, adorned with local artwork and faded photographs of neighborhood scenes. A bookshelf in the corner held dog-eared paperbacks with a handwritten sign reading, "Take one, leave one." When Ethan pushed open the door, a little bell tinkled overhead, and the rich aroma of fresh coffee wrapped around him like a welcome. Maya was already there, her dark hair swept back in a casual knot, wearing a simple green sweater that brought out flecks of amber in her eyes, looking perfectly at home among the regulars. "Over here!" She waved from a sunny corner table, sunlight streaming through the window catching on her silver earrings. Ethan adjusted his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed during his first corporate presentation years ago, and made his way over, weaving between chatting patrons and busy servers. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting," he said, checking his watch, even though he knew he was precisely 3 minutes early. "Not at all." Maya smiled, pushing a steaming mug toward him across the weathered wooden table. "I ordered you black coffee. Clara mentioned it's your usual. She's very protective of you, you know." "That's very thoughtful." He settled into the chair, the wood creaking slightly beneath him. He was hyper-aware of how his pressed suit and polished shoes stood out among the cafe's casual atmosphere of jeans and comfortable sweaters. A barista in a plaid shirt nodded hello to Maya as he passed with a tray of pastries. "I'm afraid I'm not very good at this." "At drinking coffee." Maya's eyes sparkled with gentle teasing, the corners crinkling, in a way that suggested she smiled often and meant it. "At casual meetings." He wrapped his hands around the warm mug, appreciating its solid earthenware simplicity compared to the delicate porcelain used in his executive dining room. "Most of my appointments involve PowerPoint presentations and profit margins, quarterly reports and strategic planning sessions. Well, lucky for you, I have zero interest in PowerPoint." She took a sip of her tea, a fragrant herbal blend that smelled of cinnamon and oranges. A small honey jar sat beside her cup, a wooden dipper resting across its top. "Tell me something that's not in your corporate bio, something you enjoy that would surprise people who only know CEO Ethan." Ethan thought for a moment, absently running his thumb along the mug's smooth handle. "I build model ships and bottles. It's precise work. Helps me think. Have a small workbench by the window in my apartment, where I spend Sunday mornings when I can." Now that I wouldn't have guessed. Maya leaned forward, genuine interest lighting her features. She rested her chin on her hand, her bracelet sliding down her wrist. "How did you start? It seems so intricate." "My grandfather taught me." The memory softened his voice, transported him back to sunny afternoons in a cluttered garage that smelled of wood shavings and pipe tobacco. We'd work together every weekend until I went to college. He said sometimes the smallest details matter most. That patience reveals beauty others might miss. They fell into an easy rhythm of conversation, the bustling cafe fading into a pleasant background hum. Maya told him about learning to cook from her abuela, describing Sunday mornings filled with the scent of simmering sofrito and the sound of stories told over chopping boards. She spoke about the community garden she'd started behind the center, how the neighborhood children had named each tomato plant and celebrated when the first green beans appeared. Ethan found himself relaxing into her warmth, the way she listened without judgment, how her laugh seemed to come from someplace genuine and unguarded. "Want to walk for a bit?" Maya suggested when their cups were empty, the foam long since dissolved into memory. She gathered her worn leather bag, stuffing a notebook inside. "There's a nice park just down the street. It's got these amazing old oak trees that turn the perfect shade of russet this time of year." The autumn air was crisp outside, leaves crunching under their feet as they strolled along the sidewalk. Occasional gusts sent crimson and gold swirling around their ankles. Maya pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders, tucking her hands into the sleeves. "The center became home after my mum left," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "I was 19, trying to figure out life while suddenly managing bills and an empty apartment, and these amazing volunteers showed me what family could really mean. Ms. Harriet teaching me to balance a checkbook, old Mr. Jenkins fixing my leaky sink without making me feel helpless. Now I get to do that for others. Create that safety net I needed." Ethan nodded, understanding more than he could say. His hand brushed the spot where he usually kept his wooden box, a gesture so habitual he rarely noticed it anymore. "I made a promise once," he said carefully, "about using what I had to help others. It's private, but it changed everything. Set the course for decisions I've made since." They paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. Maya stepped off the curb just as a cyclist whizzed past, too close and too fast. Ethan's hand shot out instinctively, steadying her elbow. The touch was brief, but it sent an unexpected warmth through his chest, radiating outward like ripples in still water. Maya's quick intake of breath and the way her eyes darted to meet his suggested she'd felt it too. Moving to cover his reaction, Ethan took a sip of his to-go coffee that the barista had insisted on giving them for the road, and promptly spilled it down his silk tie. Maya's laugh rang out, bright and genuine, startling a nearby pigeon into flight. "Here." She dug a napkin from her purse, the kind she'd grabbed extra of from the cafe counter. "Now you look less corporate and more human. Perfectly imperfect." "Is that an improvement?" he asked, dabbing at the spreading brown stain, surprised to find himself smiling at the mishap rather than feeling annoyed. "Definitely." Her smile was warm, reaching all the way to her eyes as she watched him struggle with the napkin. "Speaking of looking more human, would you be interested in helping out at the center? We could use an extra pair of hands with the after-school programs. No boardroom experience required, just a willingness to be present." Ethan found himself nodding before he could overthink it, before his usual careful analysis could kick in. "I'd like that. What did you have in mind?" The words felt right as they left his mouth, despite being so far from his usual commitments. "We run art classes every Wednesday morning for the preschoolers. Nothing fancy, just kids being creative and making a happy mess with finger paints and glitter. They're working on a mural for the playroom wall." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Think you can handle finger paint on that nice suit? Or glitter in your hair? Fair warning, it never completely washes out." "I'll bring a change of clothes," he promised, surprising himself with how much he meant it, already imagining what Clara would say when he blocked off Wednesday mornings in his sacred calendar. Maybe some old jeans. They made plans to meet the next morning at 8, exchanging phone numbers just in case. As they parted ways at the corner where their paths naturally diverged, Ethan realized he hadn't checked his phone once during their entire conversation, a small miracle in itself. Walking back toward the gleaming tower that housed his carefully constructed life, he felt lighter somehow, as if something was shifting in his carefully ordered world, like sunlight finding its way through cracks in a wall he hadn't realized had grown so high. Week 1 found Ethan standing in the family center's art room, sleeves rolled up, and a paint-splattered apron protecting his clothes. 20 eager faces looked up at him, as Maya explained they'd be painting their dream houses today. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air above tables covered with newspaper and jars of bright primary colors. The room smelled of tempera paint and children's excitement. "Mr. Caldwell will help you with your projects," Maya announced, shooting him an encouraging smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. She moved among the tables, distributing paper and brushes with practiced efficiency. A small girl with pigtails raised her hand, her freckled face scrunched in curiosity. "What's a CEO?" she asked, fidgeting in her chair. Ethan knelt beside her table, bringing himself to her eye level. The wooden floor creaked beneath his knees. "Well, it's like being the captain of a big ship," he explained carefully. "I make sure everyone works together and goes in the right direction. I help solve problems when they come up." "Do you like it?" she asked, dipping her brush in yellow paint. A drop splashed onto the newspaper, spreading like a tiny sunburst. "I do," he answered honestly, surprising himself with his candor. "But this—" He gestured to the bright room full of children, their faces intent on their creations, small tongues poking out in concentration. "This might be more fun." The girl grinned at him before attacking her paper with enthusiastic yellow strokes. Week 2 brought the center's monthly potluck. Ethan arrived with store-bought cookies still in their plastic container, feeling self-conscious until Maya laughed and put him to work serving punch. The community room buzzed with conversation and the clinking of utensils against mismatched plates. "Not everything needs a strategic plan," she teased when he started organizing the dessert table by size and type, methodically arranging brownies next to cupcakes and fruit tarts in their own section. "Sometimes chaos is okay." Her hand brushed his as she rearranged his careful work, mixing chocolate chip cookies with oatmeal ones. June Carter appeared at his elbow with a knowing smile, her silver hair neatly pinned back. She carried a ceramic dish that smelled of cinnamon and nutmeg. "She's right, you know," June said, placing her contribution among his carefully ordered rows. Life's sweetest moments rarely come with an agenda. The unexpected joys are what we remember. Week 3 had Ethan in jeans and a t-shirt, wrestling with a stubborn pipe under the storage room sink. Droplets of water occasionally splashed his face as he tightened a wrench against the rusted metal. Maya sat cross-legged nearby on the concrete floor, holding a flashlight steady, the beam illuminating his hands. "I could have called a plumber," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The storage room was cramped and slightly musty, filled with art supplies and folding chairs stacked against the wall. "I wanted to learn," he replied, voice muffled as he twisted deeper under the sink. "My grandfather always said a man should know how to fix things. He believed in self-reliance." His muscles strained against the stubborn fitting as memories of his grandfather's patient lessons flooded back. The pipe finally cooperated with a satisfying click, and Maya's proud smile made his damp clothes and scraped knuckles worth it. She passed him a clean rag for his hands, their fingers lingering together for just a moment too long. During week 4, Maya brought him to June's cozy apartment, filled with books and family photos. Afternoon sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on walls covered with framed memories. Over tea served in hand-painted cups and homemade cookies stacked high on china plates, June shared stories about the neighborhood's history. "This community has weathered many storms," June said, refilling their cups with fragrant chamomile tea. The porcelain teapot had a chip on its spout that she handled with practiced care. "The factory closing in '89, the flood in '02, but it's the small acts of kindness that keep us standing. Like when the Rodriguez family took in 3 other families during that big power outage last winter." Ethan noticed Maya's eyes grow distant at the mention of family, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. He found himself sharing more than usual, drawn out by the warmth of the room and the absence of corporate expectations. "I keep a letter," he said quietly, watching steam rise from his cup. "A promise I made after my parents died. I was just a teenager. Part of it says, 'I will build something that matters, not just something that profits.' Sometimes I wonder if I've kept that promise." Maya's hand found his briefly on the worn tablecloth, a touch that asked no questions but offered simple understanding. The warmth of her fingers lingered even after she pulled away. Week 5 saw them working late at the center, drafting a grant proposal. Papers spread across a table in the empty classroom, their faces illuminated by the glow of his laptop. The building settled around them with occasional creaks and sighs. Ethan insisted on keeping it anonymous. "The center needs new art supplies and books," he explained when Maya questioned him. Her pencil paused mid-note. "Not my name in another press release. This isn't about Caldwell Industries or my image." He rubbed his tired eyes, noticing how different this fatigue felt from his usual corporate exhaustion. Somehow more satisfying. The following Monday, Clara noticed something different about him during their morning meeting in his sleek office overlooking the city. Sunlight glinted off glass skyscrapers outside his window, so unlike the warm light of the center. "You seem lighter," she observed, studying his face as she handed him his schedule for the day. Miles, lounging nearby on the leather sofa, nodded in agreement, his feet propped casually on the glass coffee table. "The numbers haven't changed," Ethan replied, glancing at the quarterly report on his desk. "But maybe I have." He smiled, surprising Clara with its genuineness. Week 6 culminated in a small donor tea party. Maya had decorated the center with children's artwork, pinned carefully to bulletin boards and hanging from the ceiling on colorful strings. Ethan found himself proudly explaining each piece to potential donors, his hand occasionally touching Maya's back as they moved through the crowded room. "Look how she captured hope," he said, pointing to a bright finger painting splashed with radiant yellows and oranges. "That's worth more than any stock portfolio. Imagine what these kids could create with proper supplies." The elderly couple he was speaking to nodded appreciatively, the woman reaching for her checkbook. June pulled him aside during the event, her hand gentle but firm on his arm. "You're learning to see with your heart, not just your ledger," she said softly, eyes twinkling with approval. "Keep going. It suits you." That Saturday night, they made a simple dinner at Maya's apartment, pasta with fresh vegetables from the community garden. The modest kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and basil as they worked side by side, their movements falling into natural rhythm. They sat on her worn couch afterward, the fabric soft from years of use, talking about everything and nothing until their words grew soft with sleepiness. The single lamp cast a warm glow over the room as empty plates sat forgotten on the coffee table. The last thing Ethan remembered was Maya's quiet laugh at some story he'd told about his college days, and the peaceful feeling of belonging somewhere real. When he drifted off, it wasn't in his usual calculated way, setting an alarm, reviewing tomorrow's agenda. but with the gentle ease of someone finally coming home. Maya's couch wasn't his ergonomic mattress, and a spring occasionally poked at his back. But when he woke at 7:30 the next morning, with Maya curled in the armchair nearby, a knitted throw pulled over her shoulders, he felt more rested than he had in years. Morning light filtered through her thin curtains, painting the simple room in gold. They shared quick smiles and coffee in chipped mugs before heading to the center together, both knowing something had shifted, but neither needing to name it yet. The comfortable silence between them held more truth than any corporate contract he'd ever signed. Maya stared at her laptop screen, reading the email for the third time. The Riverside Community Foundation's offer seemed almost too good to be true. Better salary, expanded programs, modern facilities. But 3 hours away meant leaving everything and everyone she knew. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing a brief acknowledgement. "Thank you for the offer. I'll need some time to consider this opportunity. Could I have until next week to give you my decision?" The reply came quickly. "Of course. We look forward to hearing from you by next Monday." Maya reached for her phone, scrolling to June's number. The older woman answered on the second ring. "June, do you have a minute to talk?" "For you. Always, dear." Maya's voice wavered slightly. "I just got a job offer. It's a big one." "Tell me everything," June said warmly. As Maya explained the details, she paced her small office, past the wall of children's artwork and the worn desk where she'd spent countless hours writing grants and planning programs. "The salary is almost double what I make now," Maya continued. "They have state-of-the-art facilities, corporate partnerships, everything I've dreamed of having here. But it's not home," June finished gently. "No, it's not." Maya sank into her chair. "I'd have to leave the center, the kids, the neighborhood, you." "And Ethan?" June's question was careful, non-judgmental. Maya's silence spoke volumes. "Give yourself time to think," June advised. "The right answer will come." The afternoon dissolved into a blur of phone calls and meetings. Maya found herself going through the motions of her daily routine while her mind churned with possibilities. She watched the children at their after-school programs, knowing each face, each story. How could she leave them? At 5 o'clock, she drove to June's apartment, needing the comfort of her mentor's presence. June was waiting with hot tea and understanding. "I should be excited," Maya admitted, curled up in June's familiar armchair. "It's everything I've worked for professionally, but my heart feels heavy." June nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the hardest choices are between two good things. Have you told Ethan yet?" "Not yet. We're meeting for a walk after he finishes work tomorrow." Maya traced the rim of her teacup. "I'm afraid of how he'll react." "That young man cares for you deeply," June observed. "Give him a chance to show it." The next evening, Maya waited on their usual bench in the park. Ethan appeared right on schedule, his tie loosened, jacket slung over his arm. His smile faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" Maya took a deep breath. "I received a job offer yesterday, from the Riverside Community Foundation." Ethan's face went still. That's 3 hours away." "Yes." They walked in silence for several minutes, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Maya could feel the tension in Ethan's shoulders, the careful way he was controlling his breathing. "When would you have to leave?" His voice was carefully neutral. "They want an answer by Monday. If I accept, they'd want me to start in 3 weeks." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. "Maya, He ran a hand through his hair, struggling for words. "I want to ask you to stay, but I know that's not fair." "Ethan, no, please let me finish." He took her hands in his. "These past weeks have meant everything to me. You've shown me a whole different way of seeing the world. But I can't ask you to give up an opportunity like this just because I'm afraid of losing what we've found." Maya squeezed his hands, her eyes bright with tears. "I haven't decided yet." Back at his office, Ethan found Miles and Clara waiting. They'd clearly heard the news through their network of contacts. "Don't try to fix this one, boss," Miles advised, unusually serious. "No strategic planning, no counteroffers." Clara nodded in agreement. "This has to be Maya's choice, freely made." "I know," Ethan said quietly, looking at the wooden box on his desk. "I know." That evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant, Ethan laid his heart bare. "Take the week," he told Maya. "Really think about what you want, not what anyone else wants for you. If you choose Riverside, I'll support you completely. If you stay, it won't be because I manipulated circumstances or made promises I can't keep." Maya reached across the table, touching his cheek softly. "1 week," she agreed. "Meet me next Tuesday evening at the center. Same time." "I'll be there," Ethan promised. "Whatever you decide, I'll be there." They parted with a gentle hug, both knowing the next 7 days would feel like an eternity. As Maya watched Ethan's car disappear into the evening traffic, she pulled out her phone to text June. "1 week to decide. Will you help me think it through?" June's reply was immediate. "My door is always open, dear. Come tomorrow for breakfast." The week crawled by like molasses. Ethan buried himself in work, reviewing grant proposals and attending back-to-back board meetings. His wooden box sat open on his desk more often than closed, its contents a constant reminder of promises both old and new. Every evening, he found himself checking his phone, hoping for a message from Maya that never came. Maya's days blurred together in a haze of responsibility. She kept the center running smoothly, helped with homework sessions, and organized the weekend food drive. But her nights were restless, filled with tossing and turning as she weighed her choices. June's wise counsel and endless cups of tea provided comfort, but couldn't make the decision any easier. Now, exactly 7 days later, Maya stood in the empty center as the sunset painted the walls golden. She heard Ethan's familiar footsteps in the hallway and took a deep breath. "Hi," she said softly as he appeared in the doorway. "Hi." His voice was gentle, careful. They sat at the small table where they'd first shared coffee months ago. The silence between them felt heavy with possibility. "I'm staying," Maya said simply. Ethan's shoulders relaxed visibly, but he remained quiet, waiting for her to continue. "This place," Maya gestured around the room, "it's more than just a job. These kids, these families, they're my family too. And there's June and—" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My mother lives 20 minutes away. We haven't spoken in years, but lately I've been thinking that maybe it's time to try. I can't do that from 3 hours away." "The community needs you," Ethan said softly. "Yes, but that's not all." Maya met his eyes. "What we're building here matters to me. The work we do together, the way you've grown to care about this place. I don't want to walk away from that." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "I want to help more, not just personally, but through the foundation. We could fund an after-school program, maybe hire another coordinator to help with the workload. No strings attached, I promise. Just support." "I'd like that." Maya smiled. "And you'll keep volunteering? Try to keep me away." His attempt at lightness faded into something more serious. "Maya, there's something else we should talk about." She squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I've never—" He stopped, started again. "Physical intimacy isn't something I've experienced. It's important to me that you know that. It's tied to the promise I made years ago, to how I've chosen to live my life." Maya nodded, her expression gentle. "Thank you for telling me. I care about you deeply." Ethan continued. but I need to move slowly to be sure of each step. We don't need labels or timelines. Maya assured him. What matters is the work we do here, the trust we're building. The rest will follow in its own time. Relief washed over Ethan's face. So we'll keep working together, building this place up? Yes. Maya smiled. Sunday breakfasts? And Wednesday volunteer shifts. Ethan added. And I'd like to call you in the evenings when work is done. Just to talk. I'd like that too. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled outside, their joined hands a bridge across the table, their shared purpose filling the room with quiet certainty. The children will be glad you're staying, Ethan said finally. So will June, Maya added, though she told me she'd support whatever I decided. She's wise that way. Maya stood, tugging Ethan to his feet. Help me close up? Together they moved through their evening routine, straightening chairs, checking windows, turning off lights. Their movements were synchronized now, comfortable, like a dance they'd practiced for years instead of months. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Maya turned to lock the door. No regrets, she said firmly, more to herself than to Ethan. No regrets, he echoed, and they both knew he meant far more than just her decision to stay. Over the next 3 months, they fell into a steady pattern. Sunday breakfasts, Wednesday volunteer shifts, long evening calls that stretched late into the night. October 15th dawned crisp and clear. Maya's kitchen calendar showed a neat grid of X's marking off the days, each one a testament to the gentle routine she and Ethan had built together. She moved through her morning with practiced ease, toast with honey, herbal tea instead of coffee lately since it had started making her queasy. The center's weekly schedule hung on her fridge, covered in familiar handwriting. Wednesday, Ethan volunteers, math tutoring, 3 p.m., 6 p.m. At the center that afternoon, Ethan sat at a small table helping 10-year-old Tommy with fractions while Maya organized the supply closet. The scene felt wonderfully ordinary. Children's voices drifting down the hallway, the scratch of pencils, Ethan's patient explanations. You're getting really good at this, Maya heard him tell Tommy. She smiled, remembering how stiff Ethan had been those first few weeks. Now he moved through the center like he belonged here, his corporate polish softened by genuine care. But beneath this comfortable rhythm, Maya carried a growing certainty. Her period was 2 weeks late. The morning queasiness wasn't just about coffee. She'd made the clinic appointment 3 days ago, and now it was time to know for sure. I have an errand to run, she told Ethan as the children filed out. Can you lock up? He nodded, touching her arm gently. Everything okay? Just a routine checkup, she said, hating the small lie but needing this moment to herself. The clinic waiting room was quiet, just 2 other women flipping through magazines. Maya filled out forms with steady hands, answered the nurse's questions calmly. But when the doctor confirmed what she already knew, Maya's composure cracked. Congratulations, the doctor said warmly. You're about 6 weeks along. 6 weeks. Maya's mind raced back, counting days. That peaceful Saturday evening on her couch, the one that had changed everything between them. Outside the clinic, Maya's fingers shook as she dialed Ethan's number. Can you meet me? The park bench where we first walked together? I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said, no questions asked. The autumn air was cooling as Maya sat on the familiar bench. She watched a few leaves spiral down, remembering that first walk, how new everything had felt then. Ethan appeared, slightly out of breath. Maya, what's wrong? She patted the bench beside her. When he sat, she took his hand, feeling his steady pulse against her palm. I'm pregnant, she said quietly. About 6 weeks. She felt his heartbeat jump, saw his free hand move instinctively toward his chest, where he usually kept his wallet with the folded promise note. 6 weeks, he repeated softly. His voice shook slightly. The Saturday night when we... Yes. Maya squeezed his hand. I just found out at the clinic, I'm sure. Ethan's breathing was uneven. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Due in early June, they estimate. Maya's voice wavered. I know this changes everything. I know it's not what we planned. Maya. Ethan turned to face her fully. How are you feeling? Scared, she admitted. Happy too, I think, underneath the scared, but mostly terrified. Me too. His honesty steadied her. I hoped someday, but... They sat in silence for several minutes, hands clasped, watching the sunset paint the sky in gentle pinks and purples. We should process this privately first, Ethan said finally, before telling anyone else. Maya nodded. 2 weeks? Give us time to see the doctor together. Make some plans? Yes. Ethan's voice grew stronger. I'll call my doctor tomorrow, get recommendations for the best obstetric care. We can schedule an appointment this week. Within 4 days, Maya agreed. I want to make sure everything's okay before we tell people. They walked back to their car slowly, both lost in thought. At Maya's car, Ethan pulled her into a gentle hug. We'll figure this out together, he promised. All of it. Maya leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart. 2 weeks, she reminded him. Just between us for now. Just between us, he agreed. I'll call first thing tomorrow about that appointment. Maya drove home in a daze, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. 6 weeks. A tiny secret growing inside her, known only to her and Ethan. In 4 days they would see the doctor together, take the first steps toward whatever came next. Day 1 began with Ethan pacing his office before dawn, the wooden promise box open on his desk. When Miles arrived for their morning meeting, one look at Ethan's face told him something was different. You look like you've seen a ghost, Miles said, closing the door. Clara joined them minutes later, and Ethan told them both, his voice barely steady. Maya's pregnant. We just found out yesterday. Miles dropped into a chair. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. We're keeping it private for 2 weeks, Ethan continued. While we figure things out. Of course, Clara said softly, already reaching for her tablet. I'll clear your schedule for some research time. That afternoon, Ethan sat in his office surrounded by parenting books. What to expect when you're expecting. The New Father, Baby 101. His normally pristine desk was cluttered with sticky notes marking important passages. On day 2, Ethan slipped into the back row of a community center's prenatal class. He watched couples practice breathing exercises, took notes about proper nutrition, and felt overwhelmed by terms like trimester and effacement. Day 3 brought a quiet meeting with Sarah, the center's pediatric nurse. She showed him how to hold a practice doll, explained feeding schedules, and answered his anxious questions about baby-proofing. The most important thing, Sarah told him, is being present. Babies need love more than perfect technique. Days 4 through 10 saw Ethan throwing himself into preparation. He doubled his volunteer hours at the center, watching how other parents interacted with their children. June Carter became his wise counsel, inviting him for long afternoon teas where she shared stories from her teaching years. Here's how you fold a swaddle, June demonstrated on day 7, using one of her old receiving blankets. Tight, but not too tight. Babies like to feel secure. Ethan practiced until his hands learned the motions, until June nodded approval. In his garage on day 8, Ethan struggled with the stroller assembly. The instructions spread across his floor, parts scattered everywhere. After 2 hours, he had something that looked mostly stable, though one wheel squeaked. "Progress," he muttered, running his hand along the handle. Days 11 through 14 brought their first real challenges as a couple. Maya bristled when Ethan suggested hiring a PR firm to manage the eventual announcement. "This isn't a corporate merger," she said sharply. "It's our child." Their second argument erupted when Maya found Ethan's extensive spreadsheet of baby gear research, complete with ROI calculations. "You can't optimize parenthood," she told him, frustrated. "Sometimes you just have to feel your way through." That evening, they sat in Maya's small kitchen, the tension heavy between them. "I'm terrified," Ethan admitted finally, "of failing, of not being good enough at this." Maya's face softened. "Me too. But we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be present." "I promise to slow down," he said, "to learn patience." They ended day 14 by scheduling their first ultrasound appointment 4 days away. Maya wrote it in her calendar. Tuesday, 10:04 a.m., first baby picture. Ethan stared at the entry, reality settling deeper into his bones. In 4 days, they would see their child for the first time. The ultrasound room was dim and quiet, except for the soft whirring of machines. Maya lay back on the examination table, her hand tight in Ethan's as the technician moved the wand across her belly. "There," the technician said softly, pointing to the screen. "See that flickering?" Ethan leaned forward, squinting at the grainy image. A tiny pulse of light blinked steadily on the monitor. "That's your baby's heartbeat," she explained. Maya's breath caught. Ethan's grip tightened on her hand as they watched that precious flutter of life. For one perfect moment, their world narrowed to just this, the steady rhythm of their child's heart. The peace lasted exactly 24 hours. The next morning, Clara burst into Ethan's office, her tablet displaying a local blog post titled "Tech CEO's Secret Scandal: Inside the Real Story." The article was filled with unnamed sources and suggestive speculation about Maya's pregnancy and Ethan's involvement with the family center. "Thomas Reynolds," Clara said grimly, naming a nervous junior board member. "He convinced Kevin Chen in marketing to leak the story. They were worried about scandal affecting stock prices and wanted to get ahead of it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "How do you know?" "Kevin came to me in tears this morning. Thomas pressured him, said it would be better to control the narrative now than deal with surprise headlines later." The next 72 hours became a blur of unwanted attention. Reporters started calling the family center, asking for comments about Maya's relationship with Ethan. Young interns with phones lurked outside, snapping photos whenever anyone entered or left the building. Social media exploded with speculation. Caldwell Baby started trending locally. Anonymous accounts posted old photos of Maya at community events, analyzing her clothes for signs of pregnancy. Shareholders bombarded Caldwell Technologies with questions about succession planning and company stability. Ethan called an emergency executive meeting. The boardroom was tense as opinions flew. "We need to distance the company from this situation," argued Sarah Martinez, head of investor relations. "Issue a statement that Mr. Caldwell's personal life is separate from corporate operations." "No," Clara said firmly. "Honesty is our best option. A simple announcement. Yes, they're expecting. Yes, they're private people who would appreciate space. End of story." While they debated, Miles stormed into Thomas Reynolds' office down the hall. The shouting could be heard through the walls. "You spineless, manipulative coward!" Miles' voice boomed. "You had no right to expose them like this." At the family center, Maya slammed her office door, ignoring another call from a newspaper. Her hands shook as she dialed Ethan. "I can't do this," she said when he answered. I can't be your scandal. These are my neighbors, my kids' parents. They're treating me like some kind of story." "I'll fix it," Ethan promised. "How?" Maya demanded. "By having your PR team spin it? By making me into your appropriate corporate girlfriend? That's not who I am, Ethan." "Then what do you want me to do?" he asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. "I want to disappear until this dies down. I want to protect our privacy and our child's privacy. I want to just be us again, not some headline." They met that evening at June's apartment, away from prying eyes. June served them chamomile tea while they talked through options. "Stay here," June offered. "Both of you. I have the spare room, and no one will think to look for you in an old lady's apartment. You can still work at the center. People there will protect you, but avoid the public circus for a while." Ethan and Maya looked at each other. After everything, the idea of a quiet retreat sounded perfect. 2 weeks, Maya said, to let things settle and make a real plan. Ethan nodded, already texting Clara to clear his schedule. They would hide out at June's, spending their days at the center where the community would shield them. 2 weeks to regroup, to remember who they were beyond the headlines. June smiled and went to make up the spare room, leaving them alone with their cooling tea and their shared determination to protect what mattered most, their growing family and their right to privacy. Day 1 at June's apartment felt like stepping into a different world. The small 2-bedroom space smelled of lavender and fresh bread, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. June had cleared out her craft room, moving her yarn and quilting supplies to make space for their suitcases. "It's not much," June said, helping Maya arrange her clothes in the old wooden dresser. "But it's quiet here." Ethan carried in the last box, setting it carefully beside the narrow bed they'd share. "It's perfect," he said softly. That first evening, June made her famous vegetable soup, the kitchen filling with steam and the gentle sounds of chopping. As they sat around her small table, she told them about the neighborhood's history. Back in 1962, this whole block was scheduled for demolition, June explained, stirring her soup. Developers wanted to build luxury apartments, but Ms. Rosa Martinez, she ran the corner store back then, she wouldn't sell. Got the whole community to stand together. Now look at us, still here, still standing. The second and third days fell into a gentle rhythm. Maya worked remotely from June's dining table, while Ethan handled essential business calls from the bedroom. June kept them supplied with tea and quiet wisdom. On day 4, Ethan walked into the family center through the back entrance. Instead of his usual suit, he wore jeans and an old t-shirt. Without a word, he picked up tools and started fixing the wobbly chairs in the reading corner. Maya watched from her office doorway as he worked, his movements careful and focused. No cameras, no press releases, just steady hands making things right. The next week brought similar scenes. Day 5, Ethan sorting through donated school supplies, marking inventory in neat columns. Day 6, teaching teenagers basic budgeting skills, his corporate polish replaced by patient explanations of compound interest. "See how the money grows?" He showed them, drawing simple graphs. Just like planting seeds. Days 7 through 10, he tackled the center's storage room. What started as simple organizing became a full renovation. New shelves, better lighting, a proper system for tracking donations. Maya noticed the change in him. His shoulders relaxed, his smile came easier. When a young mother thanked him for fixing her son's favorite reading chair, Ethan's face showed genuine pleasure, rather than practiced charm. "He's finding his real self," June observed, watching Ethan teach a little girl how to use a calculator. "Sometimes we need to step away from who we think we should be to discover who we are." The final days of their retreat brought unexpected support. On day 11, Ethan sat at June's kitchen table late into the night, writing and rewriting a letter to the community. Not a press release or corporate statement, just honest words about love, responsibility, and hope. "Keep this safe," he told Clara when he handed it to her the next morning. "We'll know when it's time." Day 12 brought Pastor Roberts from the local church, along with Mrs. Wilson, who'd taught at the elementary school for 40 years, and Mr. Chen, who ran the hardware store. They came bearing casseroles and firm resolve. "This community protects its own," Pastor Roberts said simply. "When you're ready to face the world again, you won't stand alone." The 13th day, Maya found Ethan sitting with June, learning to swaddle a baby using one of her old quilts. His large hands were awkward but gentle with the soft fabric. "Like this?" he asked, tucking the corners carefully. "Just like that." June smiled. "You're learning." On their final evening of sanctuary, they sat in June's living room making plans. Maya called her doctor's office, scheduling another prenatal checkup for 3 days later. They needed to continue proper monitoring, despite everything else. 9:45 on Monday morning, Maya confirmed, marking it in her calendar. She looked at Ethan. "Ready to face the world again?" He reached for her hand, his grip steady and sure. 2 weeks of quiet service had changed something in him. The polished CEO was still there, but now there was something more, something real and grounded. "Together," he said simply. June watched them from her rocking chair, her knitting needles clicking softly in the peaceful moment. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening, protecting its own. The waiting room at Dr. Wilson's office felt different this time. Maya's hand gripped Ethan's tighter as they waited. 3 days had passed since their retreat at June's, and the morning sun cast long shadows through the blinds. "Maya Rivera," the nurse called, clipboard in hand. During the ultrasound, Dr. Wilson's expression shifted slightly. She adjusted the screen, moving the wand with careful precision across Maya's belly. "I'm noting something we need to monitor," she said, her voice calm but serious. "There's an indication of what we call placenta previa. This means the placenta is lying unusually low in your uterus, near or covering the cervix." Maya's breath caught. Ethan leaned forward, his shoulders tense. "What does this mean for the baby?" he asked. "Right now, it means we need to watch carefully," Dr. Wilson explained. "Many cases resolve on their own as the uterus grows, but we'll need more frequent scans, every 2 weeks instead of monthly. And Maya, you'll need to take some extra precautions." The doctor outlined restrictions: no heavy lifting, limited exercise, and immediate reporting of any bleeding. She scheduled the next scan for 2 weeks out, adding Maya to the high-risk monitoring protocol. In the car afterward, Maya stared out the window, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I keep thinking about my mother," she said quietly. "She had complications with me. I never knew the details because we don't talk anymore, but—" Ethan reached over, covering her hand with his. "We'll handle this together, whatever it takes." That evening, while Maya rested at June's, Ethan went to the office to reschedule meetings around their new medical calendar. As he walked past the break room, he caught fragments of conversation that made him freeze. "Heard she dated someone last year. Convenient timing. Who really knows?" The whispers died when he entered, but the damage was done. Someone had taken the earlier leaked story and twisted it, suggesting the unthinkable, that the baby might not be his. Ethan's first instinct was fury. He wanted to demand names, to shut down the gossip immediately. Instead, he remembered June's quiet wisdom about choosing battles wisely. He walked to his office, shut the door, and made 3 calls. First, he cancelled his attendance at the upcoming board dinner. Next, he registered himself and Maya for an evening parenting class at the community center. Finally, he requested a meeting with Thomas Green, the board member who'd initiated the original leak. When he got back to June's, Maya was curled on the couch, her phone in her hand. Her eyes were red. "Someone from work sent me screenshots," she said. "The things they're saying—" Ethan sat beside her, taking the phone gently and setting it aside. "Those rumors don't deserve our energy," he said firmly. "I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. But your reputation is less important than our peace of mind." He showed her the parenting class registration. "This is what matters. Learning how to be good parents. The rest is noise." The next morning, Ethan met with Thomas Green in his office. The board member sat stiffly, his usual confidence dimmed by Ethan's direct gaze. "The rumors need to stop," Ethan said quietly. "The first leak was damaging enough. This new gossip is unacceptable. The board is concerned about shareholder confidence. The board should be concerned about ethical leadership." Ethan interrupted. "I've scheduled a full board meeting for Monday at 10 o'clock. 5 days from now, we'll determine the company's official position on my personal life. Until then, I expect complete professionalism from everyone." That evening, he and Maya attended their first parenting class. The instructor, a motherly woman named Sarah, taught them how to hold and swaddle a baby doll. Maya's hands shook slightly, but her movements were natural. Ethan fumbled with the blanket until he got it right. "Good job, Daddy," Sarah encouraged, and the simple word filled his chest with warmth. Later, lying in bed at June's, Maya whispered, "I'm scared about the placenta issue." "I know," Ethan replied, drawing her close. "But we'll follow every instruction. Take every precaution. I'm not going anywhere." She was quiet for a moment. "The board meeting on Monday. We'll go how it goes. 5 days from now, they'll either support us or they won't. Either way, we'll face it together." Maya turned in his arms, pressing her face against his chest. Outside, a soft rain began to fall, washing away the day's tensions. In 5 days, they would face the board's decision. But for now, in the quiet dark, they held on to what mattered most: each other, and the precious life they'd created. Ethan sat in the sleek conference room of Harrison & Associates, the PR firm the board had insisted on hiring. Linda Harrison, their lead consultant, clicked through a polished presentation while Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The key is control," Linda explained, her red manicured nails tapping the screen. "We need to frame this narrative before others do it for us." Ethan pulled out the simple statement he'd drafted that morning. Honest words about love, commitment, and community service. Linda barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "Too emotional. Too personal. We need something that protects shareholder interests while maintaining professional distance." She handed him a typed page. "Try this." The words were cold, corporate. Phrases like maintaining appropriate boundaries and commitment to ethical oversight made his stomach turn. But with the board meeting looming and pressure mounting, Ethan heard himself say, "Fine, let's rehearse it." That evening, he couldn't meet Maya's eyes when she asked how it went. The next morning, the statement went live across all major business channels. Ethan watched from his office as social media erupted. The responses were brutal. Classic corporate doublespeak. Where's the human being behind this PR machine? Sounds like he's announcing a merger, not expecting a child. Miles burst into his office, tablet in hand. "It's not good, Ethan. People are calling it tone deaf." "They're right," Ethan said quietly. By the 3rd day, the damage had spread. Maya called him, her voice tight with hurt. "I read it 3 times, and I can't find us in there anywhere. Not the real us, not the nights at June's or the volunteer work or any of it." "Maya, I know you were trying to protect the company, but what about protecting us, our family?" That evening she texted, "I need some space. Going to stay at June's for a while. Need to think about what's best for the baby." Ethan spent that night pacing his apartment, the wooden promise box sitting unopened on his desk. Every time he glanced at it, he remembered the young man who'd written those words. So certain about doing the right thing, so clear about what mattered. Day 4 brought the first financial impacts. The stock dipped 3 points as investors reacted to the negative press. In the boardroom, whispers followed him. Perhaps we should postpone the community center funding announcement. Might need to distance the foundation from direct involvement. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Ethan lay awake, remembering Maya's face when she first showed him the children's artwork at the center. The way June's eyes crinkled when she told stories about the neighborhood. The feeling of assembling that first clumsy stroller, his hands learning new skills. On the 5th morning, he opened the wooden box for the first time in weeks. The paper inside was worn soft with age, the words still clear. I promise to live with purpose, to help others, to be worthy of trust. He'd thought he was keeping that promise through careful corporate stewardship, but somewhere along the way he'd confused control with care. The morning light streamed through his office windows as he sat at his desk, the promise note spread before him. His phone buzzed with messages from Linda Harrison about damage control strategies and narrative adjustment. He ignored them all. Instead, he pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write down every small moment of truth from the past months. Teaching kids about budgeting at the center, June's quiet wisdom over tea, Maya's strength when facing the pregnancy, complications. The real story, not the sanitized version. The week ahead stretched before him. 7 days to prove through actions, not words, that he could be the man who'd written that young promise. 7 days to show Maya, the community, and himself what really mattered. He carefully folded the original promise note and placed it back in the box. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope. Ethan straightened his tie, picked up his keys, and headed for the door. He had work to do, real work, honest work, and not a moment to waste. The industrial kitchen's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Ethan rolled up his sleeves and plunged his hands into soapy water. Steam rose from the sink as he scrubbed dried oatmeal from a massive pot. "You're holding that scrubber all wrong, young man," Mrs. Chen called from where she was drying dishes. "Here, like this." She demonstrated with arthritic hands, and Ethan adjusted his grip. For 3 hours he washed pots, wiped counters, and listened to the seniors share stories between bites of morning toast. No cameras, no press releases, just the quiet rhythm of necessary work. Day 2. When June mentioned Mrs. Patterson's leaking roof, Ethan made a single phone call to his contractor. By afternoon, the elderly woman had new shingles and better insulation. "Let us take a photo for the newsletter," the contractor suggested. Ethan shook his head. "No need. Just make sure she stays warm." Day 3. The support circle gathered in the center's main room. 6 expectant fathers from the neighborhood sitting awkwardly in folding chairs. Ethan had invited local dad Marcus Williams to lead the discussion. "I don't have any fancy slides," Ethan admitted, his hands fidgeting. "But I thought maybe we could talk about what scares us most about becoming fathers." One by one, the men began to share. Their voices grew stronger as the evening deepened. Day 4, Rosa's small house needed work. That much was clear from the sagging gutters and loose tiles. Ethan arrived with his toolbox, not his checkbook. "I don't need charity," Rosa said sharply from her porch. "Not charity, just a neighbor helping out." He pointed to the loose tile. "Mind if I take a look?" 3 hours later, they shared coffee at her kitchen table. Her eyes were softer when she asked about Maya. Day 5. The financial planning workshop wasn't fancy, just Ethan with a whiteboard and honest advice about budgeting for baby supplies. "What if we can't afford everything at once?" a young mother asked. Then we start small. Ethan replied, and we help each other. That's what community means. Day 6. The letter took him hours to write. He crossed out corporate phrases and wrote from his heart instead. Maya, I lost my way trying to control everything, but you and this baby have taught me that love isn't about control. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's messy. I'm learning. I'm trying. And I'll keep trying, whether you decide to give me another chance or not. He sealed it and handed it to June, who tucked it into her sweater pocket without a word. Deshataband 7. The small Italian restaurant was quiet, just a few tables occupied. Maya looked tired but beautiful in her simple dress. Ethan's hands shook as he pulled out her chair. I've been watching, she said softly, these past days, seeing you at the center, hearing how you talked to those fathers, what you did for my mum's roof. I needed to prove it, not with words, but with actions. I know. She reached across the table and took his hand. And I'm sorry too, for not giving you space to figure things out. We both got scared. They talked until the restaurant closed, about the baby, about trust, about building something real away from the spotlight. As they walked to a car, Maya stopped. June gave me your letter, she said. It was honest, real, like I want us to be. They spent the next hour planning a simple gathering. No press releases, no corporate sponsors, just neighbors sharing coffee and truth in the center's main room, where their story had begun. 2 days, Maya said, squeezing his hand. Let's show them who we really are. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of his wooden box at home, knowing that young man's promise was finally being kept in the way that mattered most. The autumn sun warmed the center's main room as neighbors arrived carrying covered dishes and paper plates. Homemade signs decorated the walls. Community support circle and welcome friends. The scent of fresh coffee and Mrs. Chen's famous apple pie filled the air. Maya adjusted a vase of wildflowers on the welcome table, her hands trembling slightly. Are you sure about this? She asked Ethan. No speeches written by PR firms, no corporate agenda, just us and our neighbors. He touched her shoulder gently. That's all we need. June moved through the crowd like a quiet conductor, introducing people, refilling coffee cups, making sure everyone felt welcomed. The local reporters, just 3 of them from neighborhood papers, sat casually at a folding table, notepads open but pens still. Clara and Miles arrived together, dressed in casual clothes instead of business suits. They joined a group of seniors playing cards near the window. Miles dealt himself into their game, while Clara helped arrange more chairs. Look who's here, June murmured to Maya, nodding towards the door. Rosa stood uncertainly in the doorway, clutching a worn casserole dish. She wore her good church dress and a hesitant expression. June moved smoothly to welcome her, taking the dish. Perfect timing, June said warmly. We need more food on the dessert table. Maya, would you show your mother where to put this? Maya's throat tightened as she crossed the room. You came, she whispered. The roof stopped leaking, Rosa said awkwardly. I made your favorite, arroz con leche, like when I was little. They stood in uncomfortable silence until June appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Let's sit, she suggested, steering them toward a quiet corner where Mrs. Patterson and other neighborhood elders had created a protective circle of chairs. Ethan watched from across the room as he helped set up more tables. The conversation between mother and daughter started haltingly. Short sentences, long pauses. But June and the elders kept it flowing, with gentle questions and shared memories. Remember when Maya organized that reading program? Mrs. Patterson asked. She got all the neighborhood kids involved. She always was stubborn about helping people, Rosa said softly. Like her father. Maya's hands tightened around her coffee cup. You never talk about him? Because it reminds me of my mistakes. Rosa's voice cracked. When he died, I got lost, worked too much, left you alone too often. It was easier than facing the grief. I needed you, Maya said. I know. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong, so wrong. And then when you grew up strong without me, I was too proud to admit how much I'd failed you. June touched both their hands. The past shapes us, she said, but it doesn't have to define our future. Maya looked at her mother's worn hands, remembering how they used to braid her hair for school. I'm having a baby, she said quietly. Your grandchild. Rosa nodded. I heard. I want to do better this time, if you'll let me try. Slowly, Maya said. We start slow. Slow is good. June agreed. Family takes time to rebuild. Across the room, Sarah Chen, the blogger who'd leaked the original story, sat watching. She'd been taking notes, but now she set down her pen and walked over to Ethan. I got it wrong before, she said simply. I was looking for scandal, but the real story was here all along, in how this place brings people together. Ethan nodded. Sometimes the smallest moments matter most. The afternoon continued with neighbors sharing food and stories. Children played tag between the tables, while parents swapped advice about schools and doctors. Clara chatted with the center's volunteers about expanding the after-school programs. Miles taught card tricks to a group of giggling kids. When it was time for Ethan to speak, he kept it brief and honest. No podium, no microphone, just a man standing among his neighbors. This center isn't about corporate donations or public relations, he said. It's about family, the ones we're born into and the ones we build together. Maya and June taught me that. You all have taught me that. So today I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as a neighbor, a future father, and someone who wants to help this community grow stronger. Later, as the sun set and volunteers packed up leftover food, Ethan and Maya sat on the center's front steps. Rosa had left with a promise to call tomorrow. June was inside directing the cleanup with cheerful efficiency. We should do something, Maya said. Something real to support the center. Not just money, but a real commitment. Ethan nodded. I have some ideas. Nothing flashy. Just honest support that helps families here. We could announce it in 5 days at the monthly community meeting. Perfect timing. Maya agreed. That gives us time to plan it right. They watched the neighbors heading home, carrying empty dishes and full hearts. The evening air was sweet with possibility, and for the first time in weeks, both felt steady in their path forward. 5 days, Ethan said softly. We'll make it count. Maya squeezed his hand as June called them inside to help with the last of the cleanup, the center's warm lights glowing behind them like a beacon of hope. Clara adjusted Ethan's tie while Miles paced the center's small office, muttering speech points under his breath. Early morning light filtered through the windows, catching dust motes in its beam. Remember, Clara said, slow and steady, just like we practiced. Ethan nodded, his hands tight around the note cards Maya had helped him revise last night. They'd worked for hours at her kitchen table, striking out corporate jargon and replacing it with simple truths. The press is starting to arrive, Miles reported, peering through the blinds. Small crowd, just like we planned. Local papers, community blog, one business reporter. Maya knocked and entered, carrying a steaming cup of tea. June's got everyone organized out there. Mrs. Patterson brought muffins, and the seniors are keeping things calm. Ethan took the tea gratefully. How's your mother doing? Nervous, but she came. She's sitting with June. Maya straightened his collar. Remember what we talked about. Keep it about families, not us. They'd spent days preparing, crafting a message that would resonate beyond personal drama. Clara had handled logistics while Miles ran interference with the board. Maya had insisted on keeping it simple: support for working parents, protection of privacy, practical help for the community. At his first practice run yesterday, Ethan had stumbled over the words, his corporate mask slipping back into place. But Maya's quiet, "Just be real," had steadied him, helped him find his authentic voice. Now, as they walked towards the main room, Ethan felt that same steadiness. The center hummed with familiar energy, children's artwork on the walls, the smell of coffee and baked goods, neighbors greeting each other with warm familiarity. June caught his eye and nodded encouragement as he took his place at the front. No podium, no microphone, just a man standing before his community. The room quieted naturally, faces turned expectant but kind. "Thank you for coming," Ethan began, his voice clear and steady. "I'm here today not as a CEO, but as someone who's learned valuable lessons about family, privacy, and community support." He glanced at Maya, who smiled softly. "I cannot promise perfection, only presence. That's true in my personal life, and it should be true in how Caldwell Technologies approaches community support." The note cards remained unread in his pocket as he continued. "Starting today, we're implementing new privacy policies to protect all employees' personal lives. No more leaked stories, no more pressure to share private moments for public consumption." A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Sarah Chen, the blogger who'd written both the leak and the redemptive follow-up, nodded appreciatively. "We're also establishing the Family Forward Fund," Ethan announced. "This isn't about corporate charity. It's about practical support for working families. Childcare assistance, emergency repairs, medical support, educational programs. The center will help administer it, ensuring resources go where they're most needed." He outlined the specifics: matching grants for community initiatives, expanded after-school programs, renovation of the center's facilities. Each point was grounded in real needs he'd learned about during his weeks of volunteering. "This community taught me that true leadership isn't about control, it's about service," he concluded. "I'm grateful for that lesson, and committed to putting it into practice." The applause was warm, but not overdone, exactly the tone they'd hoped for. June stood first, followed by the other elders, their approval carrying weight with the neighbors and press alike. Questions followed, handled with honest simplicity. Yes, the board had approved the initiatives. No, this wasn't about personal publicity. Yes, the privacy policies would be legally binding. A reporter asked about shareholder reaction. Some board members had concerns, Ethan acknowledged. But protecting families and supporting communities isn't just right, it's good business. Maya fielded questions about the fund's implementation, her practical knowledge of community needs evident in every response. Rosa watched from her seat, pride slowly replacing anxiety on her face. As the formal presentation ended and people broke into smaller groups, Clara intercepted several board members who'd attended. Their reactions ranged from cautiously supportive to quietly concerned, but the visible community backing made outright opposition difficult. Miles circulated with his easy charm, reinforcing key points in casual conversation. "You should have seen him practicing that speech," he told Mrs. Patterson. "Wanted every word to be honest." June gathered the elders for coffee and planning, already discussing how to identify families most in need of support. Their quick shift to practical matters helped maintain the focus on community rather than spectacle. After an hour of mingling and detail sharing, the crowd began to disperse. Sarah Chen approached Maya and Ethan before leaving. "You've given me a better story than any scandal," she said simply. "Real change happening at the neighborhood level. Mind if I follow up in a few months to see how it's working?" "We'd welcome that," Maya replied. "Accountability matters." As the last guests departed, Ethan and Maya gathered their things. The morning sun had grown stronger, warming the sidewalk as they began their walk home. 6 months until the baby comes. Maya mused, her hand finding his. We should start planning the nursery. I have another ultrasound marked on my calendar for next week, Ethan said, and June promised to teach me how to change diapers. Maya laughed. One step at a time. First, we need to clear out that spare room and pick paint colors. They walked on, discussing practical details, which furniture to move, whether to install new shelving, when to start shopping for essentials. The kind of normal, everyday conversation that felt like a gift after weeks of public scrutiny. Behind them, the center stood solid and welcoming in the morning light, its windows reflecting the promise of new beginnings. The nursery walls gleamed a soft sage green in the April sunlight. Ethan stood back, paint roller in hand, admiring their weekend's work. Maya dabbed a final touch-up near the window frame. Perfect, she declared, rubbing her growing belly. The morning light makes it feel so peaceful. They'd chosen the color together, spending an entire Saturday comparing swatches until they found one that reminded them both of early spring mornings at the center. Now, watching the paint dry, their future felt more real with each passing moment. As May bloomed, June's knitting needles clicked steadily during afternoon visits. Every baby needs a blanket made with love, she insisted, her weathered hands working the soft yellow yarn with practiced ease. The blanket grew alongside Maya's belly, June adding a new row each day. Rosa appeared one Wednesday morning, a still warm loaf of bread in her arms. My mother's recipe, she said simply, setting it on Maya's kitchen counter. The gesture spoke volumes. Family recipes weren't shared lightly. Maya's eyes glistened as she inhaled the familiar scent of her childhood. By June, Ethan had mastered the route to Dr. Patterson's office, attending every prenatal checkup. He took careful notes during parenting classes, his usual executive precision softening into earnest attention as they practiced breathing techniques and learned about infant care. You're doing great, the instructor assured them both after a particularly challenging swaddling lesson. Maya squeezed Ethan's hand, both of them trying not to laugh at his third attempt to wrap the practice doll. July brought the baby shower, deliberately kept small and intimate. The center's main room glowed with twinkle lights as neighbors dropped by with thoughtful gifts, handmade quilts, gently used books, practical supplies. Clara organized everything with quiet efficiency, while Miles entertained guests with increasingly outlandish predictions about the baby's future career choices. Future CEO? He suggested with a wink. Future community organizer? Maya countered, making everyone laugh. August found Ethan cross-legged on the nursery floor, surrounded by crib parts and instruction manuals. Maya dozed on the new rocking chair, exhausted from the summer heat. Are you sure you don't want help? She murmured sleepily. I've got this, he insisted, then promptly attached the side rail upside down. Their shared laughter echoed through the apartment. September 15th began at 3:47 a.m. with Maya's quiet voice. Ethan, it's time. He was instantly alert, years of early morning habits serving him well as he calmly gathered their hospital bag. His hand remained steady on the small of her back as they made their way to the car. The hospital corridors were hushed at that hour. Miles paced while Clara sat perfectly still, both of them looking up anxiously at each sound. June arrived with thermoses of coffee and her quiet, grounding presence. Right here with you? Ethan murmured as another contraction peaked. Maya gripped his hand, her face focused and determined. The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, Dr. Patterson's calm voice, nurses checking monitors, everything proceeding with reassuring routine. I see the head. Dr. Patterson announced. "One more push, Maya." At 7:23 a.m., their daughter arrived with a strong cry. Ethan cut the cord with trembling hands, then watched in wonder as she was placed in Maya's arms. "Hello, little hummingbird," Maya whispered, using the nickname they'd chosen months ago after watching the tiny birds at June's bird feeder. Later, when Maya dozed, Ethan carefully unfolded the note from his wooden box. He tucked it beside their sleeping daughter, its worn edges speaking of years of careful keeping. The promise written there had changed shape over time, growing into something larger than his younger self could have imagined. June and Rosa visited briefly, their usual dynamic softened by the new life in the room. Rosa touched her granddaughter's cheek with gentle fingers, her eyes bright with tears. Messages arrived throughout the day, cards from neighbors, quiet congratulations from board members, a tasteful note from Sarah Chen requesting a future interview when they felt ready. Clara fielded calls and kept the media respectfully distant, while Miles appointed himself unofficial door guardian, enthusiastically vetting all visitors. 1 year later, the center hummed with anniversary celebrations. Streamers decorated the walls, tables groaned under potluck dishes, and in the midst of it all, little Sarah June Caldwell took wobbly steps between her parents' outstretched hands. Ethan balanced his daughter easily as he led a brief board meeting, his leadership style now marked by patient listening and collaborative decisions. Maya's craft table buzzed with activity, children creating colorful thank you cards for center volunteers. June sat in her usual chair, teacup in hand, watching the scene with satisfied eyes. The community she'd nurtured for so long had grown in unexpected and beautiful ways. That evening, after the festivities wound down, Ethan opened his wooden box. He added a new letter beside the old one, this one addressed to his daughter. "My dearest Sarah, I kept my promise, not to stay alone, but to be present. Your mother taught me that real strength lies in opening our hearts, and this community showed me the power of genuine connection. You are surrounded by love, little hummingbird, and I will always be here, learning and growing with you. Love, Dad."